Firefight.
Oh, you're not going to keep going? I hit record and then you stop? uh,
Got him.
right. So, everybody, this is Bailey of Dankless, and we are going to do a joint podcast. Oh my God, your hand disappeared. That was terrifying. Just like disappeared
Night
into the
Stalkers
background.
level
Right.
stuff.
Oh, shit. We're going to be doing a joint podcast together. You can call it Dank Phoenix. You can call it whatever you like to. I prefer to call it if you want to win that way. And today we're just going to
Oh,
be talking about. We're going to go over our Adepticon. I know I did a pretty in-depth one, but we're just going to touch on it a little bit, talk about the change of venues, things like that, and then we're going to do maybe some pros and cons from the firefight tournament and a couple other things, and then we're going to shift into GW, and then we're going to wrap it up with a hobby challenge. Sound good?
that works for me, man.
Hell yeah, brother. So, how many Adepticons have you been to? Because you've been to more than me, and I'm not a rookie.
Boy. I've only been to like one or two more than you, so maybe about 4 or 5.
Right.
Seems about right.
And, it's been in Chicago forever. But this year it was in
Yeah.
Milwaukee. How did you
hmm
feel about the move to Milwaukee?
Well, I'm much more of like the experiential person. So like I've done the Adepticon where I went and played basically every single day, nose to the grindstone, never really left the building. And I mean that has its own appeal, but I've gotten to be more on the side of things where I like to go and enjoy the area. And as much as I liked walking to Costco every day when we were in Schaumburg, I definitely approved more of being able to walk around downtown Milwaukee and have access to a bunch of different stuff that we didn't have access to in Schaumburg. Like Schaumburg always felt like you had to drive somewhere to get to anything or really walk a long way. Whereas with Milwaukee, you walk out of the convention center and you're surrounded by all sorts of fun stuff.
Well, the Milwaukee is like it's in Milwaukee, right? Whereas with
Right.
Chicago, it was in Schaumburg. And for those that aren't familiar with Chicago, that's like the northwestern area of Chicago, if I remember right. And that's where all the uppity, like rich people live. It's not a low income area, and it is pretty spread out. Like you said, everything's kind of big walking distance. And it stinks. It smells so bad. But that's just my experience with Chicago and cities in general. So, um, what about the venue? You like it?
Well, it's similar to the one in the convention center that's in Louisville that I went to last year for Louisville PopCon, where it had sort of like two parts and then a sky bridge that connected the two. I felt like Adepticon filled out both sides because there was one day where Garrett, who also went with us, and I just kind of wandered around and tried to figure out where everything was and look at every inch of it, and it seemed a lot more filled out than when I was in Louisville for another game that I play called Hounds of War that I'm on the development team for. uh, where we were like off in a corner and the rest of the con was on the other side of the building but only on a certain floor. Like it just felt very condensed and spread out at the same time, whereas Adepticon was like it was everything, which was nice considering that at the old space, if you wanted to see some of the historical gaming and a few of the like more historically leaning vendors, you had to leave the main hotel and then walk across the highway past the Costco and get to the other hotel
Yeah.
and then come back, which is not always bad, but this is also Chicagoland at the end of March, so it could also be very bad. So it just kind of cuts people off from different parts of the con, whereas this was much more inclusive, I felt. I like that.
Yeah. I agree with all of those things. It was almost like, for lack of a better word, like a spider web, right? Like it was really big, but everything still felt connected. Whereas,
Yeah.
Chicago, like you said, if you wanted to see anything for the most part historical related, it was a hike too. It wasn't just cross the highway. That was a trek. And yeah, there was a couple times where it was not warm. Had those brisk
Yeah.
brisk Midwest spring. But it was pretty cool that the whole con felt full without feeling stuffed. Like the Baird Center was
Yeah,
big,
that's true.
you know, but it's not like when we were in Schaumburg and everybody, or Gen Con, for example, where everybody's literally just nut to butt the whole time you're there. Like
Yeah,
there were a lot of people, and some of the vendors were setting sales records, and it never really felt like you just couldn't find a place to sit and have a couple seconds of
right,
quiet. You know, that little area downstairs, like when you first walk in, you could sit down and eat, and there's like hundreds of people in there. But it was like the acoustics in that building were so good that it wasn't as oppressive to the senses too.
right. Which is a big deal to a lot of convention goers that may have sensory issues or they don't want to be, bombarded with noise, light, things like that. And that helps. Though I guess the one big thing we haven't brought up was parking. That was a big deal. Like at Schaumburg, like trying to park at the main place was crazy if you didn't get there stupid early. Although they had free shuttles running back and forth from other places that were free to park. I think there was a shuttle for Milwaukee, but we didn't end up using it. It was from a game store somewhere in town. There was a lot of. I felt like there was a lot of parking. It was Gen Con prices unless you could find like the lot that we were in the first couple of days. But then the issue then became that because it was downtown and there's an NBA arena, there's several college arenas, and then like AEW Collusion was being taped that night, one of the nights we were there. So like our parking lot had like dynamic pricing. So like it was like $15 a day, $25 a day, $35, and then they tried to charge us like $100 to overnight the night of the wrestling thing, and we had to go find another place to park, and then came back the next day, and it was like $25, $35. So
Yeah.
that is not an improvement over Schaumburg,
Yep.
but also, you had options. You could be in different spots. Like there was the one night I went and parked somewhere else, and we had kind of the Schaumburg walk, to the historical walk to get there, but it was free.
Right.
So it's just that part was a little rough, but I understand, and it wasn't like I said. There were plenty of options. It's not like Indianapolis with Gen Con where like there really is only one or two options, and it's $40-$50 a day.
Right.
Like it wasn't that. Like you had options. You could park at the convention center for like 40. You could park a little bit away for 30, 35. You could park a little bit further away. Like where we parked was less really than a block away. And the first couple of days during the week, it was only like $25.
Yeah.
Whereas if that had been Indianapolis, that's a $40-$50 parking spot.
And really, like that lot we were in was basically just right across the street. It was kind of a weird angle, but man, yeah. I think that, and I think out of all the things that I could say that were negative about my experience, um, the on-site food vendors were cool and very good, but the drink
And
prices,
diverse.
right? But the drink prices, and I don't just mean like if you wanted a beer, but it was like going to a ball game pricing for
Yeah.
sodas, water, so it was like, man, it's $9 sushi rolls, and they were pretty good, and they were worth $9 when you see, like when you talk about sushi pricing. But then it was like, all right, well, I'm going to get
Right.
this sushi roll. It's $9, but if I want a water, it's also $9. So I'm just paying $20 for a sushi roll and a water. Like, it was a little extreme. I understand that they've got to make their money, but at the same time,
Right.
like you don't have to price gouge me, because they were trying to ban outside food and drink, which didn't look like they were doing a good job of.
Yeah. Well, like they had really good water fountains, like the refillable water stations in like the middle parts, and it was ice cold. Took a big advantage of that, so I highly recommend for that. But yeah, no, like that was something that was a big negative for me compared to Schaumburg because it was more of a hotel. Like this is a standalone convention center compared to the hotel convention center you have in Schaumburg. Which, to be fair to Schaumburg, they did have no outside food and drink rules. It's just they never seemed to be enforced. And it was like, for me, some of my favorite Adepticon experiences were like the 40K team tournament or the doubles for Long War, where you walk in and before we even rolled dice or put our armies out on the table. Dudes were pouring drinks for everybody and
Right.
just trying to have a good time. I actually saw that guy that I ended up playing back to back years where he was like the cocktail king, and I said hey to him. But yeah, there was definitely a lot more of that. Now people did have some stuff, and I know one of our mutual friends had his stuff taken from him because someone was like, "Hey, you can't have that in here." And when you went to the convention center, like they had metal detectors, they were
Yeah.
going through people's bags, so they were pretty serious about that. But at the same time, what I would say, like as much as that kind of killed some of the vibe that I enjoyed, right? People didn't seem to be sloppy drunk like there are in past years.
Right.
I only really heard of like one big like rage outburst from one of the 40K events where somebody just kind of lost their mind and left, as opposed to like multiple incidences because
Right.
people were drinking. And then if you wanted to drink, you just had to build time into your schedule to leave
Right.
the
Go
convention
go to
center
the.
because it's
Yep.
Milwaukee and you're in Milwaukee. Like we went to like the German Beer Hall, which is connected to the Hofbrauhaus network, where there's only 3 of those restaurants in the U.S. and then the main one is in Munich. So like if you wanted to get actual authentic German beer and like the big glass steins for like $10 or whatever, it wasn't very maybe it was 15, but like we can get the liter stein of actual German beer within a 2 block walk of the beer center. So like play your game, play it on time, play it quick, play it clean, get over, and then have an hour to the end of a round and just be like,
Right.
well, we're gonna walk down the street and have a beer and come back. Like and those prices were reasonable. I went to a distillery one night, and the food there was a little expensive, but it was very, very good and different. But the cocktails were like $8 or $9, and they were good. Like I ended up buying a case of their liquor and bringing it home with me because I was
Right.
like, this is a great product. Like, you guys have a great product. They only distribute in Wisconsin, so I was like, well, this is my only chance to get this, and I was like, I'm getting some of this and taking it home. So because it's got to last me till next year. So like, there's
Right.
definitely lots of cool things. Like I went on a brewery tour where I was like, walk 10 minutes and try a beer to, I spent a whole afternoon doing that one day.
Right.
So when it comes to my experience, like, yes, I kind of missed like having drinks with the boys at the table. But if you wanted drinks with the boys, you just had to leave. Like there was a place less than 2 blocks from the convention center called Third Street Hall that was like a indoor food court, but it wasn't like generic stuff or like the Chick-fil-A or whatever. Like it was all like local stuff. And they had a self-serve beer wall. Like if you went to a froyo and like
Right.
self-served yourself ice cream by the ounce, they literally were selling beer self-serve by the ounce out of a wall with like taps and things. And I was like, so like if you really wanted it, you can go get it,
Right. It was there to be
and
had
at a
for
reasonable
sure.
price.
You know, and it's one of those like. My understanding too is that they kind of let back on some of those reins as the weekend progressed because I don't think the convention center really understood the spirit of Adepticon at first. And then I think as people went through, because I talked to some of the people, I talked to the security even, about hey, like I'm just curious, I'm just an idiot with a YouTube channel. I'm gonna ask you some questions. You don't have to answer them. I'm not gonna pester you. But it sounded like for the most part they were told at one point basically if they are not just like carrying in gallons to just let it through, like if they've got a couple beers in their bag, just who cares, like don't sit there and try to nitpick everything. And I think it's one of those where for those that have never been, Adepticon is a it's not a serious event, right? Like yes, they have their sweaty tournaments, but it's much more of a just like hang out with the homies
Yeah.
and maybe drink a couple beers type of thing. And it's definitely more designed around just like a good time. So I think as the weekend progressed they started to kind of chill some of that out a bit too. So that being said, overall, out of all the Adepticons I've been to, this was honestly probably my favorite. Like, despite my few nitpicks, I think the convention center was awesome. The fact that Milwaukee
Clean.
clean, yes. The bathrooms didn't smell like a hate crime every time you went in there. The fact that
Yeah.
uh, Milwaukee's not that much farther from Chicago for us is kind of a plus. For those that don't know, Chicago is anywhere from 1 hour to 2 hours of a drive for me, and it just depends on how shitty traffic is. And Milwaukee is really just like 2.5 to 3.5, depending on Chicago traffic. So Chicago traffic is still the defining factor on how shitty the drive's going to be. But
Well,
overall,
and then
go
like
ahead.
when we were in Milwaukee, I didn't. Well, I'm saying like we were in Milwaukee because we stayed like 10 minutes away near
Yeah,
the airport. Like getting in and around Milwaukee downtown felt awesome compared to having to drive in
yep,
Chicago because
yep,
I've done that. Like I know I didn't do a lot of the driving. I know you didn't do a lot of the driving, but maneuvering around downtown Milwaukee was so much nicer
yes,
than trying to deal with Chicago traffic. So I definitely want to give it that. Yeah, for me, like Adepticon, I'm saying this 8 or 9 out of 10.
yep.
With a few negatives, kind of knocking it down, but like yeah, overall, like I definitely enjoyed that experience a lot more than I think I did at any of the Schaumburg places, just because of the food scenario, the going out and doing stuff scenario, and basically a lot of the auxiliary things that made getting to and from the convention center nice. And then like if I wanted to leave, like step out, because a lot of times people get sick, they get the con crud, and I feel like some of that has to do with the fact that like people are eating con food, they're drinking too much, and they're just trapped inside all day. So like it was kind of windy, and like I went took a long walk one day. I think I mentioned down the river walk, and it was blustery, and it's just like blowing, in my head, I'm like blowing all the germs and stuff away from me. I know science probably says that's not quite how that
Right.
works, but
Yeah, but
it
the fresh
it
air and
felt
the sun
it
and
felt good to
everything.
me to be out and like yeah, and be out in the sun and the wind and not be in a confined space where everybody's breathing on me for 4 days.
I don't know if you heard that like low rumble. I don't know if my mic picked it up at all,
No,
but there was some sort of lightning or thunder, and I just heard this like blah, 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 blah. That's when I was checking my headphones. So, but no, I'd agree with you. Eight
I
out of
figured
nine.
it was
Or
one of the dogs or the kids
well, that's
or
also
or the construction.
right. No, not this late, thankfully. But yeah, I'd probably put it right there, 8 or 9 out of 10. You know, there's a few little nitpicks here and there that I could make, but overall, definitely my favorite Adepticon experience. And at this Adepticon, you got to play in your very first firefight tournament. So
Yeah,
let's
I
talk
get
about.
to.
Yeah,
I
that's
got
right.
to.
That's right. And so we're gonna talk about that a little bit. Again, I went in pretty deep in my stream where I talked about Adepticon, and so now as somebody who's as new to firefight as I was to Dead Zone and Kings of War, I went in. I'd played basically one game of each for all intents and purposes. Um, had never been around the Mantic community at all. What did you think about the tournament overall?
I mean, overall, I think it was fun. Now, like I understand it was advertised as like a national event, but in terms of vibe and feel, I felt like it was a little more of a like what 40k players would call an RTT, and I feel like that's just because the game's new and there are a lot of I didn't feel like I was the only first time player or someone that doesn't play it super seriously. Uh, I played the 4 rounds. I played a guy named Marcelo who's very friendly, very considerate of the fact that I was playing like my third game of firefight, and he was playing like the guard equivalent.
Yep,
I think it's what
GCPS. Yep.
GSPS, yeah, it's like basically they're Imperial Guard. So I just kind of try to treat him like Imperial Guard. I'm like, okay, there's some tanks, there's a lot of infantry. He's got special weapons teams. I was playing Space Vermin because Chris had it. He was painting it for me. He forgot one of the models, but everyone was chill that I was basically playing with an empty base. So to give you an idea of like how like chill it was, like I'm sure there were if I'd played 40k, just because it's a bigger event and there's have a wider variety of people, someone probably would have complained at some point that I just had an empty base and this was a Adepticon and I spent my money and why am I having to play ghost bases, and which I understand, but I also feel like hey man, like I basically got strong armed into this, so here I am. Chris says I get to play,
That's
but
right.
that's
Bailey says he
it
has
was
to
a you
play.
get
I
to
tell him he
play.
gets to. It's a privilege, not an obligation.
Yeah. So but he understood, and I kind of let my nerves get to me because I've taken a lot of pride in playing 40k and just like I may not be great, but I know what I'm trying to do, and I can get my games done under time so that I have that time to like relax and like go get a drink, have a snack, go to the bathroom, refill my water bottles. Because when you sign up for these events, you're not trying to play every minute of every round. Like you may think, oh, you get to. It's like, well, when you've played 40k champs at Adepticon and you're playing 4 2-hour 45-minute rounds, like the only reason I was able to play that many games was because I never really went to time, and I'd played that same list like 20 times before I got to the con. So I was able to knock games out, even with deployments and stuff, in 2 hours or less. And anytime you can knock time off a round because you got a game done beforehand, you want that because you just need the break. Like mentally, it's so draining to play these games, especially firefight. Where, and I know this has got mentioned somewhere, either I was listening to your podcast or somebody else's podcast, but it's true of like you don't get to turn off in firefight like you do in 40k, where you're like, hey man, while you're doing your movement phase, I trust you to like not cheat this. I'm gonna go to the bathroom, or I'm gonna go get a drink, or I'll get us a beer. Like you can't do that in firefight because of the alternating activation system.
Yeah,
like you're always constantly doing
a lot
stuff.
more engaging.
So you don't have these like little you don't have these like natural breaks in the game where you can kind of turn off and just kind of wait and see what happens. But at the same time, I enjoyed that. It kept me involved, but like I just kind of was nervous because I was like, I don't want to take time away. You know, I want the game to try and finish, but I don't think it's going to get there because I don't really know my units. I don't really know the game. You know, I messed up. The objective was put some hostages in your squads or something like high value assets with some of your squads, and like. Yeah, but then like I put them in my assault squad, which like punished me because I thought, oh, I'm not supposed to put these on my heroes. Which if I put them on my heroes, that didn't really move the whole game, it would have worked out better instead of like putting it on one of my actual like value units. Because I just kind of was like, I don't know what to do. They get one and they get one, and afterwards I was like, should not have done that. On the recon roll, I had enough where I could have picked up some stuff and moved it, and I really should have done that because once Marcelo kind of laid out his army, I realized he had a side with a lot of guns and infantry, and a side that was a little less guns and infantry, but some more tanks, and I could have just overloaded that side because it's also where his high value units were, or his objectives were, and so we could have just basically put all the objectives on one side of the board and just played on one side of the board instead of me trying to fight him across the whole board, which didn't end well for me.
Give me 1 second.
The second round.
Give me 1 second. Let me check
no worries.
the time here. I've got a little ghoul who's just standing there staring at me.
Is it Izzy?
Sure.
Hi, Izzy.
Okay, no, now is not the time for that. Okay?
Bye, Izzy.
No gang signs. Oh, Dad's working. He's in the basement, so he doesn't like get interrupted. Let me go interrupt him.
Women.
You're not wrong. All right. I just needed to write down that timestamp. So anyway, sorry for the interruption. You realize your high value targets got put in the wrong units. Could have moved them, scored a little better. Who'd you play round 2?
I had a buy.
Nah, but tell me, who was it? No, I had a buy.
Yeah. So I had to play Chris.
Yep.
And as Chris knows, we can't have friendly games because we're always trying to. I mean, it's like a friendly gotcha, the other one. Usually when it comes to 40k, because we both TO'd so many games and have played so much that we're not really interested in who wins. It's who can pick the other one's brain and like create a scenario where one of the two of us are stumped and don't know the answer.
Yep.
The problem is that I can't do that with this game. So I was very much in the, okay, Chris is just going to do things and I'm just going to have to sit here and suffer. And then because of the way Enforcers, his army works, they have a lot, it's very elite, so there aren't very many models, but they all have a lot of wounds and armor, and then they have a lot of ways to react to stuff that I'm doing. And so like Chris would be like, well, don't do that, or don't forget, I get to do this. And I'm like, if I don't do anything at all, are you just going to kill me but better? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, well, then I'm just going to do what I was going to do anyway. Like, quit trying to make me second guess myself because you have some special reaction when doing nothing is worse. And that's just a tactic I learned from like playing orcs. Like what made playing against 40k orcs for long so scary is, when they charge you, they do a bunch of damage and they have all these buffs, and it's like, okay, what if I charge them? Well, they have a lot of buffs, they're good, but they don't have all their buffs.
Right.
and you get to fight before them. And so I was like, okay, well, it's still going to stink. I'm probably still going to die, but at least I get to kill a couple of them before I go. And so that was sort of
Right.
my mentality going into that matchup. But that just wasn't. That just didn't go well.
Well, and that's just
But
taking time.
Chris and I talked.
Yeah.
We talked about it afterwards of just like trying to make sure because it's Chris's list. Like I'm trying to pilot a list that I don't understand how it works that Chris built, and so like we talked a little bit afterwards about making sure like I understood that like the crawler units or the little rats with guns, they're trying to blaze away. They're not trying to kill things. They're trying to use this blaze away ability to put pin markers on things to slow things down, to turn off charge reactions, try and set up my assault units so that when they charge, they don't get overwatched, for lack of a better term, because 40k uses that term, but Overwatch means something different in Firefight.
Yep.
But there's like 4 or 5 different kinds of 40k Overwatch in Firefight, along with like reactive moves and things like that. So, and the way to kind of deal with some of that is to try and pin things, and so that's kind of what we talked about there. So I went into round 3 and I applied some of those. I was playing Forge Fathers. This guy named Felix, he was really chill.
Oh,
We're
Felix
both
is
playing
awesome.
the 0-2 table. Yeah, so we're not trying to get too crazy. I basically looked at the table and went, it's space dwarves. Space dwarves are just dwarves. Doesn't matter what they do. They're going to sit there and shoot. So I just kind of got really aggressive, got up in his face, sat on the center of objectives because it was like player placed objectives. And there was like a little clump off on one side that I could get to. He made the mistake of not looking at the mission in depth to realize he had to have at least 2 units strength to control an objective, so he tried to hold objectives for several turns with just a single unit with a unit strength of 1, so he never actually scored any points. And then there were a couple of turns where instead of advancing and shooting, he just sat and shot, when he should have been advancing and shooting and applying pressure. So by the time he realized that it was time to come out and start sitting on objectives, basically the game was over. And I'd scored enough points that there was no way for him to come back, and so he just kind of shot at me, and that was that. But I ended up winning that game, and then last round I played a guy who's also from Indiana, from Fort Wayne, named Josh. Or no, Jordan.
Jordan.
His name was
Yeah,
Jordan. You'd played him before. He was playing Marauders, which
yep.
are just space orcs for
Played him
Firefight.
round 1.
He had a lot of like mega knob looking guys, basically, for lack of a better term.
Rainmakers, yep.
Yep, and so they made it rain. Definitely did not want to be in the range of those things.
Yeah, they're brutal. They are a brutal unit.
But it's one of those where like you got to control table sections, and then he just kind of managed to pick up enough of my stuff that at the end he could kind of walk into my side of the board, start taking my table sections, and I just couldn't catch up. But we killed a lot of everybody's stuff. Like I killed 2 or 3 of his tanks. He killed all my big stuff. So it was a fun game, even though I lost. So, overall, I enjoyed the game. I did end up getting like a starter box from the Manic booth because they gave everybody $10 off a $50 purchase or more. So starter box qualifies for that.
And I think they were.
And then they had a 20% off.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a pretty good deal on that. I ended up going with Night Stalkers just because for me, hobby's a big deal, and I felt unfortunately for Mantic, like with the Space Vermin, seeing the new Games Workshop Skaven with the new like Sigmar set. When I see what it could be, and then I look back at the Mantic stuff, very dated. I hate to say it.
No, and so
in my opinion,
the one thing I will say about Mantic's models, and I've said it before, is that like you can tell which ones are really old, and you can tell which ones aren't. Like if you look at the crawlers and the stalkers, because that's the same kit, like those are some hideous models. Their legs are just like a little wedge, for lack of a better word, and it's both legs are one wedge. They don't even have like much space between them. There's no thigh gap. Like they're not even sexy, right? But
yeah.
and I'm joking, but so it's like you see those and you're just like, these are old, these are dated. But then you see some of their newer stuff, like some of the newer Night Stalker models, like you're about to say, the Reapers.
Yeah.
The Reapers are gorgeous sculpts, So it's one of those like that is the downside.
Butchers.
Yeah, and that's the
Butchers,
downside.
like the box art doesn't even do the model justice. Like I pulled the sprues out when I got home, and I'm like, there's so much more musculature that the box art, because there isn't as much like shading and highlighting as I want to do, to pull out some of the edges in it to like really show off just how detailed that kit is.
Yes.
So that's definitely one of the hobby things I'm going to be putting in, is making sure I have the right color combo, because they're like really dark brown or red and with like some white skull parts on the box, and I'm really going to try and mix it up to where the darker parts are more brighter, so you can see all the little muscles and things that are in them, because I feel like it's definitely kind of downplayed just how nice that is. And then going into that, it's also an army I can play for Kings of War. So if I collect, it's like playing Chaos Demons, sort of, because Chaos Demons are in a weird spot in Warhammer right now. But it used to be, if you
Right.
played Chaos Demons, as long as you had a way to swap out your bases, you could play. Well, I mean, you could play 40k, Sigmar, and Old World, and just kind of swap things around.
Right.
And get creative with your basing and your movement templates. And that's kind of what my plan is with Night Stalkers, is to have fun playing around with the bases for Kings of War eventually. Once I kind of get this smaller thing built for Firefight.
Yeah. And, you had fun. You got through all 4 rounds. You even won a game. What were
I got to.
Right? What were your three, like, what are 3 good takeaways from that tournament, from that event? And it doesn't even have to be like, it could be anything. Your opponents, the game, the rules, whatever. Just three positive takeaways.
Oh, I mean, the people were great, like very understanding, considering where I was very upfront of just like, hey man, like I'm just gonna stumble through this because I really don't know what I'm doing, and so people were helpful with helping me kind of like giving me time to find my rules, trying to get to the end of the game. There are a couple of them, like I think our game we got done on time. Felix and I got done on time. So yeah, so like it was just like things like that were important for me. The TO seemed to be Aaron. He was really nice and seemed
Yep.
very knowledgeable on what was going on, which was very, very helpful. The terrain, I mean, there was a lot of terrain, I felt like, on the boards. They were, no, not enough.
No, so and
I'm used to 40k. I'm used to 40k boards where it's like a couple of big
right.
buildings and you're kind of done. Whereas these, they were a lot of smaller things, and then like there was diversity because the game has a lot of different terrain rules compared to 40k, where like there were forests that did this,
Right.
and then there were buildings, and it kind of interacted a little more like 4th edition with like the height values
Yep.
of things, and like woods being more abstract, but like they were just like little neoprene mats, and it's
Yep.
like, man, I wish those had kind of been like real trees. Keep that in mind a couple months from now, because we're going to come back to this concept. Chris and a 3D printer buddy of mine have been talking, so watch this space.
So the one thing I will say is, because I had a lot of people, right? Because like in the Firefight Fanatics Facebook group, which it's not official, but it's like the official group,
Yeah,
the unofficial official group. It's run by a lot of Pathfinders, so a lot of people were just like, "Oh my gosh, where's all your terrain?" So with Firefight, the way it works best in my experience is when the tables are kind of dense, but it's a lot of smaller pieces, rather than some bigger pieces here and there. And so normally what you'd see maybe 3 to 5 more pieces of terrain, but a lot of them aren't going to be any bigger than maybe like this, right? They might be a little bit bigger,
gotcha.
or even just like you'll get clumps of like these. This is barrels. I don't know how well you can see it, but you'll get some
Yeah, I can see. Yeah,
clumps of barrels, and those little clumps of barrels might count as a feature, things like that. So what you'll see a little bit more dense, but it's like I said, a lot of smaller stuff. And a lot of people were just like, "Oh my God, where's all the terrain? Oh my God, where's all the terrain?" Well, I talked to Aaron about it, the TO, because I was just like, "All right, man, like, what's happening? What are we doing here?" Like, I don't care. But it was just like, I was really surprised after going to the Michigan GT and then coming here, just the difference in terrain. And I think what really surprised me was that some of it wasn't painted, right? That was what shocked me.
right.
And Aaron was just like, "Oh, well, there's actual totes of terrain that never actually made it here." So we had to just kind of slam this together and make it work. So again, big shout out to Aaron and all those guys, that whole crew that
Yep.
made sure that event still went off without a hitch. Because that's why, if you saw pictures, that's why some of those tables looked a little rough. But they busted ass, they got stuff out, they got stuff on the table, and they made sure that the event still went well. So again, just a big shout out to them, because those guys really worked hard. And I don't think anybody was intentionally trying to dog on him, but it's just like, hey guys, like, check it out. There's a reason for this. But yeah, so you'll
Well,
see.
and
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, well, that just comes from like years, like having to do things for like 40K, like building terrain. Like I've spent whole summers building Nova L's and things like that. And so, like that, like not to dog. I mean, again, not dogging, just more of constructive criticism of both the player base and the tournament. Of just like I felt like that, like there were a lot of people that didn't play. This wasn't their primary game.
Yeah.
And so they were kind of in the same boat I was, like trying to play through it. And there was definitely a lot of I'm going to look at the table and treat things as I see them. But the actual rules of firefight, having had time to listen to podcasts on the way home because it was 4 hours home from Milwaukee, for me at least, it's a lot more abstract.
Yes.
And I feel like if they had the correct terrain, or they built terrain that was less abstract to help new players, to help inexperienced players understand what things are supposed to do, because like we had these buildings and they had a lot of windows and this, that, and the other, and so people were like trying to shoot through them, which I didn't really think was an issue. Like oh yeah, there's window, because that's how 40K works. But when you actually read the rule book for firefight, and I listened to the controlled fire podcast on the way home where they're talking about buildings, no, that should never have happened. Or
Right.
like people were shooting through forests when they were more than 3 inches between a forest between the target and the unit, which also should not have happened. But like I didn't know, they didn't seem to know, and it's like one of those where like, okay, going forward, like there needs to be some sort of, hey, this is how this works. So like I know like for 40K, specifically at Adepticon in the past, they made a big deal out of like the buildings having all the first floors. Like if there were windows, they were boarded up or covered up, and so like, and again, like you said, this is something that they probably had fixed if they'd had the right terrain boxes. Yep. But just like to reinforce, I guess, the idea for next year of like, if you could help people like me that are coming from 40K where true line of sight is like a thing, if I'm not supposed to see through something, make it very clear on the table that I can't see through it, because otherwise I'm going to try and do it, and I'm not going to be the only one. And I feel, and then the issue then becomes like, you think you have enough terrain, well then suddenly you don't, because everyone's shooting through everything and it's a total madness. And again, I think that also comes from the fact, like, just like the player base, like, I wouldn't have been doing it if someone had been like, hey man, this is how this terrain works, like, we shouldn't be doing, it doesn't do that, it doesn't do this. But if we're both just kind of stumbling through it together, we have that issue, and I feel like that's where, it's a very young game, very young tournament, compared to where I'm coming from, a Warhammer, where there's a large community of people that play a lot and play at a high level. And I feel like that's one of those things where I am excited about with Firefight, is that because it's so young and fresh, like, and I like being in that environment. So we'll see as the podcast goes on and grows, that there's a lot of opportunity for growth. Like there's a lot of opportunity to get people on the table playing this game to get to that higher level of understanding just based on experience. Like not just of knowing my army, knowing other people's armies, knowing how the terrain is supposed to be, developing tables and terrain that interact the way to get people to the most balanced, best experience at the table, and then constructing missions and tournaments and deployment, like doing all this other stuff that like there's only one deployment zone in Firefight. Like it's the old school Dawn of War, which I appreciate. I love Dawn of War deployment. But some of the missions we had would have been a lot more interesting, in my opinion, had we had a different way to set up our armies. Would have made the scoring make more sense, because like there was a mission where we were supposed to be moving our objectives out of our deployment zone into the middle of the board, but like neither one of us read that part, and so like we were hiding back in the corner with our objectives, and I don't know if we'd had like the weird box with the half circle cut out of it, but like you could start on the edges and just kind of step out. That would have made that mission a little more interesting. As opposed to like basically there's only one place to go, which is just kind of straight out forward. Like we could have gone to the sides, like there would have been a little bit more to go on, I think.
So and that's something I've actually brought up, because I do talk to the rules committee on occasion. I'm like, hey, like Is there a plan for different deployment zones? And their take on it is yes, there's a plan, not really a huge timeline on it because they want to make sure when they do it, when they start implementing it, it doesn't create a huge imbalance in the game, right? Like search and destroy is very strong for melee armies. So it's like, all right, if we do that table quarter deployment zone, does this skew the game so much that we have to start changing the way we write rules? So what they're trying to do is they're trying to write missions as they go along that fit the existing rules rather than just tack things on, which I can appreciate. But that's already like
Right.
something that I've talked about doing is I'm going to start writing up an actual whole mission packet for the game. And what I'll probably do is I'll probably do like a mix of deployment zones but use the current mission rules. So like maybe we do the was it the one you're talking about, right? I think that was Bodyguard. Maybe we do that one with the search and destroy, and we play it out and we see how it goes. Things like that. Um,
Right.
you know, but that's one of those like I agree. Everything being Dawn of War does kind of make it feel a little samey after a while, and really just changing your deployment zones with the current mission set might be enough to like just give it a test run. And really the way to make sure it doesn't become an imbalancing issue is when you're like, okay, we're only going to have one like off mission. Like we'll do two regular missions and then
Right.
one off mission for a 3-round tournament. And then, nobody can really skew for this like deployment zone or anything and it should be fine. So
Right.
terrain, that was obviously an issue, and that was like the biggest thing I heard most of the night is just people didn't know terrain rules, and even afterward when I kind of addressed the community on the internet and stuff about it, even a lot of the other players in like Australia and stuff like that were just like, the terrain rules kind of suck for this game anyway. Like this is the game's weakness right here. So what I did was I took it upon myself to just kind of try to clean them up a little bit. I actually have submitted the doc to the rules committee, and I told them, hey, look, like this isn't intended to replace rules. It's not intended to be a final copy. It's just like a rough draft of how we could maybe rewrite these so that they're easier. So it doesn't change the way the terrain works. It just changes the way the rules are organized. And what I think would work best is if instead of just being like difficult terrain is X, and you and I have talked about this before,
Yeah.
give everything a keyword. Each terrain feature is a bucket for keywords. You put the keywords in the bucket, and that's what the terrain feature is. And it works just like our units do then. Instead of having vicious and elite and all these other things, instead it's like, okay, well, ruins have cover, area or footprint or whatever keyword you want to call it, and then they have difficult ground.
Yeah.
And then you just look to see what those keywords do, and then you go, okay, that's how this works. And I think if it gets
Right.
organized in that way, it becomes easier because the issue becomes in the rules, there's no difference between a ruins and a wood. And I actually had somebody be like, bro, there's no such thing as a ruins in the rule book. And I was like, yeah, dog, there is. It's mentioned like 2 times in passing, but they're in there. And so like he went through and read it
Gotcha.
and he was like, "Oh god dang, they are." Yeah, so it's like but they're just the same as woods. And so like I think that's where some of the confusion comes is like there's nothing saying this is a woods, this is a ruins. It's just kind of this generic kind of this is what it could be if it's difficult ground. And when you have that level of vagary or vagueness, it just creates a lot of confusion where it's like, okay, but if I were to say, hey, ruins give you this and this and this, and woods have this, like you create a standardized rule set that uses the keywords, and the keywords are just lifted straight from the core rule book to where nobody has to change anything about how they're playing. It just changes the way it's organized. I think that'll go a long way. I also shot that doc over to Aaron to review because he was just like, hell yeah, if you could do something that would make it easier for me, I'm all for it.
Right. Well, and then again, I would also put in because like you could put the everyone's like, well, just put in the packet. Well, I know certain people, not to name too many names, but they don't like to read the packets. They just show up and play. So
And I still
something you can
kick
put on the
ass.
table, like you get you. you get to make fun hobby things, right? You get to uh, that you can put on all the terrain features, even if it's like one of each type on each table, like the woods, like the wood. Here's like a little thingy that tells you what all the keywords are
Yep.
for woods, and you put it on one of the woods. So it's like, okay, if you go into woods, this is the little reminder token that says
Yep.
it has these things. Or here's a building, or here's a ruins, or here's an obstacle. Like you know how people have like the little like let go things for different
Yep.
abilities and things that they put on their units, or like the little 3D printed like die tray holder. Like you need something like that you can just like put next to something, and just one per table is necessary. We can figure it out from there, but it's just like a friendly reminder to someone who hasn't read the packet or is just a little bit, brain fog because it's game 4 in a row on a Thursday, that after a long day of travel, that like, hey, this building has these things,
Right.
or this terrain piece has these features. Don't forget that. And I feel like that would go a long way to helping people.
Yes.
It's like stay in the game, and then it helps the table stand out because I don't think any other game does that. So like when people come into the room and see the game, they're like, "Oh, this is kind of cool. Nobody else does this." And again, this is something you'll notice, I think, too, if you listen to Chris and I talk long enough on this podcast. We're not always necessarily interested in winning or losing on an individual basis. It's definitely, and again, I think I've already mentioned this once, it's about how do we get other people to enjoy this. Like we want other people to come in and play. So how do we stand out? How do we change our approach when we play, or try and get people to play with us or play our games, so that it stands out and it sticks out? And that, to me, that would be kind of a cool way, because I don't think anybody else does that kind of stuff.
Yeah. No, I that's it. It's community first. Like, sure, I like winning as much as the next guy, but at the end of the day, it's still just community. Build the game, grow the game, and then beat all the people I've invited into my community. So outside of terrain, was there anything else that you felt was kind of negative at all? Or was that pretty much it?
I mean, I just kind of touched on it already. I felt just like this didn't seem to be too many people's primary game, and so like the pace that people played at, like sort of the knowledge of rules, like having to reference things, the decision making, like in terms of like decision paralysis, I felt like some people suffered from that. Whereas like if they had played this game, like this was their primary game, they were playing it 2 or 3 times a week. And again, I keep going back to 40K because there was a point where I actually played 40K 3 or 4 times a week, and I could play. I knew most of the matchups. I knew what was going on before I even, I looked at someone's list. I knew what things were. I knew what I had to go, to kill first to, try and get a small advantage. And I feel like a lot of people in this tournament didn't have that level of experience, which is fine. It's a new young game, but that's definitely something that like next year going into it, like I definitely want to get more reps in before I go.
Yep.
Because having that knowledge, like I'm not going to have decision paralysis. I'm going to be Johnny on the spot. Like, oh, I'm playing GCPS again. All right, I know what that unit is. I know what that character does. I know what his orders are. I've played this game 5 times. I do this, and this, and then I just go. And there isn't a lot of stopping and thinking. And I feel like that would help. Then, if everybody's doing that, that helps the tournament, because then games are finishing on time. Like you're playing games to completion and they're finishing on time, as opposed to games going to turn 2 or turn 2.5, and then we're at the 2.5 hour time limit, and the game is, very much not decided, or one side is clearly winning, but had you played the rest of the game, they would have very much lost the game. Like everyone's played those games in 40K. I know I have, and it's something that I feel like, again, just if people had more experience, it becomes a non-issue, because we're just out there playing. And again, it comes a lot from my 40K experience of like just when we used to play at Chris's old game store in Knox. Like that was a Shark Tank. Like people came in from outside places and were like, "Oh my goodness, this is not just some like local." Like everybody's just kind of playing Garage Hammer group. Like these guys are playing not necessarily medalists, but they're playing highly efficient, highly practiced. Like they know what they're doing. They know what my stuff does better than I do. And there's no gotchas. There's no surprises. Like everybody just knows what they're there to do, and the game gets played in a very clean, efficient manner. And at the end of it, you're both just kind of saying like, "Wow, that was quite a game."
That's right.
And I
We're all
feel
here to
like
bash butts, buddy.
we get to
That's
we get
right.
to
Bashing butts and mixing guts. That's what the kids say, right?
yeah, right. And so I feel like, as much as that, I might say that's negative. It's kind of a small negative, and but it's also a motivation of just like there's room for improvement in the competitive scene of like if I want to get better at this game, I just have to practice
Yep.
more because it doesn't seem that a lot of people playing had a lot of practice. So if I go in with, if I could play 10 to 20 more games between now and next Adepticon, I'm going to have a leg up
Yeah.
on the competition and shoot for a podium place. Like, I'm not going to try and win it. Like, I don't think I have the time to dedicate my life to build paint and then play firefight at a level where I could win Adepticon. But I could try and podium.
You still
Like,
gotta,
that,
still
that I
gotta
don't
go
think
through me,
is
buddy.
right. But that's what I'm saying. Like, to get
Right. No, I got you.
to go from like having one win to go from like having one win and three losses to
Maybe three
three
and one. Yeah.
wins, 3-1, or 2-2. Like, to get that, to pick up that extra win from where I had this year is probably 10 to 20 games between now
Yeah.
and March of next year, and I think that's feasible and not unreasonable, and that's motivating. Like, all right, we're gonna go get the experience, learn the matchups, and then go and again, I think that should be exciting to anyone that's curious about Firefight. Of like, look, if you're curious, go get some models, start playing the game, and if you could get those 10 to 20 games between now and Adepticon, you have a shot at it. In my honest opinion, you would have, if you have a lot of experience playing tournament wargaming, whether it's Games Workshop, Mantic, or something else. If you put 10 to 20 games in the next year into this game and then go to Adepticon, you have a shot at winning their national tournament. And I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily. I think that should be
No.
motivating to anybody that's curious or new to the game.
I would say you're right though. Like, there's a huge skill for as small as the event was. We're talking like 14 to 16 players. There's a massive skill gap from the top 4 to the bottom 4. And
Yeah.
that's not, to say anything other than it's just like table time. That's all it really boils down to.
Yeah.
And what was cool is like when I played Adam, there were things I knew about the rules that he didn't know, and then there were things he knew about the rules that I didn't know. So for both of us to be like intrinsically and intimately familiar with these rules, and for both of us to find things that the other one didn't know, was just kind of cool. But no, I agree. Like, and one of the things we even talked about was just there's almost like this weird rift, right? Like, there's no mid-table
Yeah.
players in Firefight right now. You just kind of have hobbyist bottom table players who just kind of stumble their way into wins against other hobbyist bottom table players. And again, being a bottom table player doesn't mean you're a bad person or a bad player. It just means this isn't the game that you play the most. But then you have, like I said, like that top 4, top 6 who just have that, like, this is the game that we play, And so it's just one of those, like, there's gotta be
think about it this way.
that middle gap, right? Like, we gotta help fill in that
Right.
middle gap.
Right. Well, yeah, because again, with any sort of community event, you want to have those tiers, and then you want to find a way to get the people in each tier to come back, right? If you're at the bottom and you're not doing well, you need to have prize support, sportsmanship goals, best in factions. Like, you could be bottom of the table, but you're the only person that played your faction, so you're getting an award and you're getting some prize support, and you get to go home like, oh, I got some return on my investment of my time, my hobby hours, and my money to get here. But like, another way to think about this. If you said to me, I want to go to Adepticon and win a tournament, and I'm looking at Firefight or 40K champs, I would be telling you the amount of time and money and reps you'd have to put into winning the 40K championship between now and next year Adepticon. Like, we're talking about probably several hundred games.
Yeah.
Of 40K.
Yeah.
Like, realistically, you're going to play several hundred games of 40K to have a chance to make the top 16 cut.
Yep.
Right? Just to make the top 16, it's going to take several hundred games. To podium at Adepticon for Firefight if you could push 20 to 30, I know I said 10 to 30 before, or 10 to 20, but like if you can find
1 to 2 games a
to where you're
month.
playing almost once a week, or like once a week, or like a tournament a month or something between now and Adepticon next year, you will probably podium. And it's like, so if you want to go home, like I know you got, Chris, some of those like cool like Adepticon medals. Like if you
Yeah.
want one of the cool Adepticon medals, there are definitely some out there that are easier to obtain than others. And the 40K champs one is not one of the easiest ones. Whereas Firefight, because the community was a little bit smaller, the table time isn't necessarily as deep as 40K. I feel like that would help a lot. And then again, with the people, like people were nice and friendly. There's not a lot of people. It's like, I don't know, just like there's. I mean, I don't want this to come off and sound like I'm like demeaning and hateful, because I really enjoyed the Firefight community, which is why I bought an army and I want to go back and play again the
Right.
next year. But like I've played enough 40K to know that like that 4 round tournament is very draining. There's a wider variety of people. There's so many more people. You were so like this. Oh, this is something that I noticed is we weren't like packed in hip to hip like you are when you play in the 40K championships. Like there's so many people and there's so little space. You're like constantly bumping into the guy behind you, bumping into the guys next to you. You can't hear yourself talk very well to the person across the table from you. The Firefight, everybody had space. We had room to put our armies and our books and our drink and snacks, and we could hear each other. So that was definitely a plus. Don't change that. I enjoyed
Yeah.
that quite a lot.
No, that was awesome.
Just having space.
And even when that place was packed in for Kings of War, like it was still, you could hear people. It was still, yeah. I think that room was just awesome.
Yeah. Having that smaller, more intimate space was nice. Like you felt, it felt more intimate as opposed to being upstairs where once they opened up the vendor hall, like you were in this massive like football field sized room,
right.
football plus size field room, and it was just a lot. So, but no, definitely the key bit is I'm going back. I'm gonna take Night Stalkers. I'm gonna try and get the reps in. Chris and I have been talking strategy literally every day, almost every hour of every day since we got back. And no, I'm gunning for it. I'm not gonna go back and do that event and not do well. Like I'm gonna have cool painted army. I'm gonna have the reps. I'm gonna try and shoot for that 50-50, and then with a higher like push goal of like I want to get on the podium for next year. So
then you also got to I don't mean to cut you off, sorry, but
yeah, no worries.
You also got to sit through some of the Kings of War tournament, right? And we're not going to spend a ton of time on Kings of War. But again, that was my real first experience with it. I fucked with it a little bit in first edition and was just like, this game's ass. And then I came back to it a little bit just for this tournament, basically. I after playing as much Firefight, it was like, all right, we're gonna check this out again. And what better way to learn a game than to just show up at a tournament and have everybody just whap your pee-pee for a few days? You know, you're just going in, you're gonna get beat up, but you're gonna learn. And you got to watch some of those games, you know, because you weren't scheduled for anything on the weekends besides clocking in and doing a little bit of work. But outside of that, like you got to watch some of the games, you got to see the community, and you got to see all the hobby stuff. And I just wanted to get your take on what you saw for that brief period that you got to witness that, because I have my own opinions on it, and I just want to see how they line up with yours.
All right, so the also of this, like part of the reason we talked about this is like I had friends playing the Old World tournament upstairs that I went and spent time watching them play Warhammer Old World, and then I came down and watched people play Mantic Kings of War, and I guess like to me the biggest difference was like visually, like the way Old World is played competitively now currently, because the monsters and the Hero Hammer, which Old World's my OG game. Like that's what I grew up playing with my dad. I still have all of our armies. Like I'm gonna play that game too, right? Like that's my game. But what I want to, the way I want to play Old World, looking aesthetically at Kings of War fits the aesthetic look of like there's blocks of infantry, there's blocks of cavalry, things are moving around the board. and like little pieces. Whereas like I went upstairs and watched a Bretonian player play a dwarf player, two of my buddies from Indy, and the dwarf player literally had a giant brick of dwarves and then a slightly smaller brick of dwarves, and that was his whole army. And I was like, "That's it." And he's like, "That's all I got." And he's like, and then basically what happened is the Bretonian player had a couple of lances. He came down the board, charged headlong into the dwarves, and they just kind of sat there and rolled a couple dice at each other and did combat res. And from what I could tell, that was going to be the game for the next hour. And I was like, okay, that is where this game is right now. Whereas then I went downstairs like King's War with Chris, excuse me, and there's units and things are changing facings to react to different movements. And not to say there aren't big units in Kings of War, but it wasn't two. Right?
Right.
And that's kind of what kind of visually that shocked me with the old world is I was just like, man, there's when I played this game back in the day, like we had little 20-man bricks of stuff all over the board, and you had left wing and a right wing and a center, and that doesn't seem to be with the game state right now. And Kings of War has that game state, and I liked that a little bit more. And then of course I've always known with Kings of War they have that like
The
the
mono base.
unit tray base is what matters, not necessarily the individual models. So that gives you the opportunity to be more creative on your hobby and fill your space. Like I know Old World brought that in with the new edition of like, hey, because we don't have all the kits available right now, people have limited collections. You can do these fun little vignette pieces and put them in your units to fill them out and have them count as 10 models or count as 5 models.
Right.
So that way you can get to the table faster, and that's just kind of like a key core to Kings. Now I noticed Kings changed it from like 51% to like 75%. So you have to have a few more models on the board, but I definitely I like that idea, and that's like where my head's like churning out ideas for Night Stalkers
Right.
of like how I'm going to get these guys on rounds to play firefight, but then I'm going to turn around and figure out how to get them on these flat trays so that, and then put decorative pieces on there with them so that they look really cool. And then if I have a different idea or I want to change it up, then it's just a matter of swapping out a few pieces and putting in something new.
Well, and you and I were talking because like after the tournament, I was sold. Like going into it, I was very skeptical because I played a few games on Universal Battle with a buddy of mine. I think we've played 3 total, and obviously the game functions on Universal Battle very well. Like it does. But there was just like part of it was I didn't know my rules, so I'm going slow, and
Yeah.
so that detracts from it. And part of it is just like the model aspect always just makes it better. Don't get me wrong, being able to sit down and play a game on Universal Battles is handy if you need games and you're going to a tournament and you don't want your ass kicked. Like if you're like, hey, I'm actually going to try to place, I'm not just going to try to get sportsman or hobby. Universal Battle is an invaluable tool, but it is not how I would introduce somebody to the game. When I
No.
got there and I was pushing models around, it made some of the concepts of the game make a lot more sense. And seeing
Right.
everybody's hobby and stuff like that was super cool. And I walked away from it. I walked into it going, I don't know if I like this game. I don't know how I feel about the I go, you go structure because that's what's pushed me away from the 40Ks. And that really is what keeps me from diving into Old World super hard. Because I do still play it with John, but at the same time, it's like, man, but I'd rather just play other things. And so,
Right.
like, that kept me kind of leery. But then once we played it, and I played it at a comp level, and I played it to time, I was like, oh, okay, this game's actually a lot of fun. Because again, I'm coming from a rules first perspective. Like, is the game fun? Because if the game's fun, I'll play the game. And then we got done, and as
Right.
soon as we got done and we're driving home, I'm like, yeah, I'm buying an army. Bet, dude. I'm buying some halflings, and I'm going to make like a soccer hooligan Blood Bowl team themed army. So, like, that's my goal for the next year. I don't know if I'll get it done because I have an army that I can field now. I have like an old lizard man army I can convert over, and I'm going to do that quickly. and then I'm going to slowly try to build and paint the halflings out. And that way, if I don't get them built, I still have something to take to Hoosier Storm. But if it does get done, then it's like, cool, I can play my halflings. But I have, and we're going to use this as our segue here in a minute. I have, I've got rats to finish painting because I want those painted well. I don't want them painted to the bare minimum table standard that you got to use them for, you know. And we talked about that. Like, you can look at the units that I put time into, and you can go, oh, this is actually painted well. My tunnelers painted well. My stalkers are not painted
Right.
well. And so, like, my goal is to get everything to the same standard. So I have a whole army to get to a specific standard. I want to get that done. I have Night Stalkers that I want to get built and painted, but they are way low priority now that you're going to get Night Stalkers, because it's like, okay, you're going to get them. Cool. I'll have them on deck in case you need to borrow anything, but I'll
Right.
probably shift into Veerman because that was like what I wanted. And I was just looking for an excuse to play something that wasn't Enforcers at Adepticon, but I still ended up playing those damn things. Everybody's like, "Oh, you're the Enforcers player," and I'm like, "I'm really not, man. Like, I'm really not. That's just kind of like what I've ended up playing at every major event I've been to, but it's almost not by choice, Like, stop. But so like I don't have to worry about those so much. But then I also want to get. I've got a whole Lizardman army that's built but not painted, but I want to get them at least painted to play, so that way if I can't get the halflings built and painted in that time, I have some salamanders that I can run when I go to Hoosier Storm, and I can at least be like, I have a army. I don't know if it's a good army, but I have an army. But then, because somebody decided to talk to me about going to Hawaii in front of my significant other, I am now committed to a tournament in Hawaii. Um, that's in January. And I'm going to let you talk briefly about what it is and who's running it and all of their stuff. And then we're going to jump back into why I have to build a whole 40K army and have that painted as well.
After we've talked all this smack, but it's like, oh no, we're still gonna play. Like, don't get us wrong. Like, I run a Dark Angel specific podcast. I've been running it for almost 5 years now with my buddy Heath. He's got me hooked into the tournament in Hawaii. So it's run by Table War Hawaii. They do these really cool metallic transport units
And if they have
that like
they
you
have
can
a
take on a
website, right?
plane. Yeah,
So
yeah, they got a
I'll
website
make sure we put a
and
link in the description for this.
yeah, they do mats. They do like little like area terrain mats. Like a lot of the 40K, like if you played Adepticon 40K champs, you probably use some of their mats and some of their like little terrain, like area mats. That's kind of their thing, and so that's what they're doing. And they also have a charity that does advocacy work for families that have autistic children. And so that's what this thing in Hawaii is about. It's about having people out to Hawaii to play some 40K. You're gonna be. I went this last year. It was their first year. We were up at a YMCA camp up on North Shore, so we were sleeping. It was a little bit rudimentary, right? Like there was like 4 guys staying in cabins with bunk. We each had like a little clump of bunk beds to ourselves. Which, if it had been summertime, each bunk bed quad would have had 4 kids. So like the space that 4 kids would have had, each like one one adult person had. So we had room for our clothes and our armies and stuff. And then in that cabin, there was a shower and a bathroom. And then there were some additional bathrooms and stuff throughout the facility. But like the main event piece was that like there was some open area. There was like an enclosed like meeting house and then like an open area like you would see at a park where like you'd have like a family picnic. And that was all laid out with tables and their mats and their terrain and stuff. And we played 6 rounds over 3 days. And then like each day there was like a round period of 3 hours where we didn't actually play 40K. We actually like went to the beach, or we had a bonfire, or we did these other things, camp related activities that were a lot of fun. And the idea is that they're trying, for every $2,500 they can raise, they can help a family is basically how their bit works. And I think we almost raised enough money to almost help 2 families, I think. But some of the other fun stuff was like they had some silent auctions and raffles. Like every round, like you got a ticket. If you lost, you got two, and they were raffling off some of their mats, some of their carrying cases. They had some donated stuff from Army Painter, like the big sets were being raffled off. They had someone donate beer, so they were like, "Hey, you can drink, within reason, right? Don't kill yourself. But if you want to have a couple beers over the week, they've been donated. They don't. There's nothing extra, but we would like you to make an additional donation at the end of the donation you made for this tournament to help cover, the expenses like that. They didn't just give us the beer because they wanted to have drunk gamers. Like they wanted to encourage people to continue to donate more and have a good time at the same time. And I mean, this year, this next round, the same concept. They're going to try and go from the 30 players that were there this year to go up to the 64. It's going to be $400. $400 gets you one of those bunks, 9 meals, and you're in like basically the main tournament fee for like prize support. And then they have people that have volunteered to like drive you to and from the airport, so you don't have to rent a car or get a bus or anything. So for $400, you can stay like half a week in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Which, if you try to go to Waikiki and stay in a big hotel Waikiki, that's super expensive. Like my dad and I are trying to stay a couple extra days on base because he's a retired Army colonel, and at his officer rating to stay on base in Pearl Harbor is almost $300 a night. So the 2 or 3 nights we're going to stay in Hawaii after the tournament, like doing Pearl Harbor and stuff with this next year, costs more than, and that's just the hotel, not 3 meals a day and everything else. Costs way more than what you're getting with this tournament. And then you get to play 6 fun rounds of 40K, plus a lot of other fun. Plus you have like all that aloha spirit and the beach and the wildlife. And so highly recommend. I was talking to Chris at Adepticon. They had a raffle, and I was like, "Oh, come on, Chris, you could win the free night in the free stay in the yurt because they have these like more personal like yurts where you could stay." And I guess the other big thing too is that you can bring other people with you for like $300 per person. You could bring other people. Like last year, people brought their wives and kids. Chris is bringing his significant other this year, and that's why I was like, "Hey, man, if she wants to go, you should really throw in these $20 to try and win the raffle to go on the yurt to go to Hawaii, so you guys have a little more privacy, not have to like share a cabin with other people." Although I don't know if they would have made you do that if it was a couple, but like now you don't have to worry because you have your own private yurt.
Right. I just felt bad for everybody
But
else.
Yeah. So if you aren't a huge 40K person, again, like we were talking about that firefight tournament, you don't have to play a lot of 40K to go to this thing in Hawaii and have a good time.
No.
Like just know how to play the game, and you should have a good time because like you'll be able to, like if you put 10-20 games in between now and January, you'll know enough about the turn sequence and what your army does and you can get a game to finish in 3.5 hours, which is all anyone's really asking for. Can you play your game in 3.5 hours, 5 turns? The answer to that is yes.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And that's all you really need to have a good time.
And so, like, because of this, I am now building a 40K army because I don't have one, right? I went through and I just
you get to
sold
Chris.
Everything, sold it all. I'm actually shipping the last of it out tomorrow, and so I was just like, oh gosh, now I get to. I'm so privileged.
Yeah.
And I had
You
people
are.
tell me like, oh, I'll loan you one, and if it were a local event, I probably would have taken them up on it. But I don't want to take somebody else's stuff on a plane, on a beach, all these other things, and risk having something happen to it. And then at the end of the day, when it's done, I can just like put it on the shelf or give it to Eli or whatever, because he likes Space Marines, and that's what I'm building. Yay! He likes Space
Enforcers.
Marines. No, because these are melee Marines, and enforcers don't melee nearly as well. But yeah, so he likes them, and he doesn't like. I don't think he would enjoy 40K, but he does like OPR, one-page rules, because that's one of the things I've learned with my kids is like they have the same issues I have with the I go you go structure, and so when you get a game like OPR that's kind of designed around 40K models, but it's back and forth, like he was down with that. So it may just be one of those that sits around the house and, gets used for that. But yeah, I'm going to build Blood Angels. I bought the Sanguinor while we were at Adepticon, and I bought some Assault Intercessors and the Blood Angels upgrade sprue so I can make some handsome Death Company lads. And I'm just going to I'm going to stuff as many jump pack dudes as I can into a list. And
Yeah,
I'm just going to tap all my creatures, and math is for blockers, homie. That's what we're doing.
you get to.
That's one of us gets to. My goal is I don't care who wins. We're done by round 3. That's it.
Yep.
One of us is tabled by round 3. That's all I can ask for.
Yeah. If it's not over by end of round 3, my wife's going to be sitting here tapping her foot, wondering when we're going to the beach, and you're going to have a very obnoxious last two. No, it's not going to be Sherry.
She's not going to be sitting there watching, bro. She's literally going to treat it like when we went to Tampa. She's just going to kick me out, and she's going to go do her own thing, and then she's going to come back in the
Gotcha.
evening and be like, "Oh, are you finally done?"
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, you're going to get started, and then about 3 rounds in, she'll show up and like, "Are you done yet?" And if you're not, we're going to have a problem.
I mean, that's fair.
What I'm
Yeah,
saying.
yeah, okay, yeah. So I'm gonna be probably doing
It's like it's beach time.
right. I'm gonna be doing some video content about Blood Angels, just to kind of talk about what I'm looking at for my lists and stuff like that, and what I'm building. It's not gonna be anything crazy. Outside of that, we've got some future events coming up. I've got a firefight event in this month in like 2 weeks, which you're not going to be at because you had something
Yep.
else going on that weekend, if I remember right.
Yeah, I'm going to be at Hoosier Con, Indianapolis, Eastside Marriott, running Hounds of War, which is my buddy's open format, sort of open source universal rule set. We're running like a tank battle, like a World War II tanks battle, sort of like World of Tanks, but in miniature. I know they have their own like official game, but like he's been doing this for like 10 years, long before World of Tanks was even a game. He's got American Revolution stuff to do, Punic Wars, Rome and Carthage, right? Scipio Africanus versus Hannibal, the War Elephants, the Flaming War Pigs, all the craziness of that. And I feel like there's one other game he's doing that I don't remember. But those are all sort of like pickup, like one-off pickup, like show up, know nothing about the game. That's fine. Sit down, we'll teach it to you. Kind of like pickup games. It's not a tournament. It's not a narrative event. It's not a campaign. We're just kind of like trying to introduce the game and show off the versatility of it. Otherwise, yeah, I would be hanging out with you that weekend. But
That's Easter
this
weekend
is something
too.
I've been doing for right. But I've gone to this convention. I've missed one in like the last 16 years.
Yeah,
And that was because I went to England to go to Warhammer World.
and that's
So
super
like
fair,
that's
right?
over spring break. Yeah, like outside of that, like I've been at this event, and something my dad and I have done together for almost 20 years. So like I'm going to that event. It's how it is.
And so this firefight event, I've got to double check my roster, but we're going to be sitting somewhere between 10 and 12 registrants for just a little local event, man, and that's awesome. I started my first tournament with like 4 players right after Michigan GT last year, and that's how much bigger the community has gotten. Outside of that, in May, there's Oricon in Michigan City, and I'm going to be running just like an intro to Halo type of tournament. So players who register won't have to bring their own models or dice or anything. I'm going to have all the boards set up, and then they're going to drop in and they're going to play 3 rounds of Halo. And then there's going to be some prize support, which is pretty cool, and that's actually getting provided by Mantic, which is one of the other things I really appreciate about what they do is they're like, hey, if you're doing something at like a con, we'll do our best to kind of hook you up, So that's been pretty cool to work with them.
Right.
So outside of that, I don't really think I have anything else on the schedule. I know June, July, like I'm gonna probably do some sort of apocalypse size event. We talked about that. And then obviously sometime around Veterans Day, I'm going to be doing something for that. And those are both going to be some sort of big, massive, like drop in. I was thinking about maybe trying to do like a big APOC firefight game. Just because I think that could be pretty cool. They don't really have the units to support that though, is the only downside. There's no like knights or anything, but whatever, we'll figure it out. It's one of those like, You just wait till the last minute and slam it together. Not that I do that a lot.
I mean, for me, I'm looking at Indie PopCon in June,
Yeah.
which I mean, might be able to get you in with something with that there with hounds. Also, trying to take hounds to a couple new states this year, or areas at least. Like I'm going to try and go to NashCon in Nashville,
Yep.
Tennessee, mostly because I've been through Nashville so many times, but I've never actually stayed in to like see what Nashville has to offer. So I want to
Yeah.
take this opportunity. And then at CincyCon, I was talking to the people that have Phalanx like Consortium, which is like a game store near Fort Campbell,
Yep.
and they're doing their own con in November right on the border between Kentucky and Tennessee called Phalanx Con. And I'm like, well, we kind of have to go. We're doing a Punic War campaign, like year-long campaign for Hounds of War. Why would we not go to the convention called Phalanx Con? That
Right.
seems pretty dumb. So we're gonna try and do that, which will make it interesting because I can't take time off
Bro,
in that
while
time with
you're
my
in
day job.
Clarksville,
So
right? Clarksville and Hopkinsville, those are the two towns in Oak Grove.
yeah,
Well, not that I know this area, but while you're in Oak Grove, make sure you hit up Cat West, see if they still got the one-legged midget strippers, and head down to
that's
Clarksville.
not going to happen. It's not happening.
Head down to Clarksville.
No, it's
I don't know if it's still there, but it was called the Pink Lady. And so before anybody like roast me, I've actually never been in either of those places. Uh, they just struck me as cesspools, and the stories I heard from the soldiers that I served with that went there, they just kind of reinforced that thought process that these are just cesspools, right? Like you get chlamydia just walking in the door. You just like could smell the gonorrhea in the air. So
oh, definitely hard pass.
yeah, it's gonna be a no
Um,
for me, dog.
yeah,
But
yeah. There's no get to in this.
no,
There is
no,
definitely
that is not a privilege, sir. But yeah, no, it sounds like you got a pretty full schedule. We're gonna wrap up here before we finish up. If you like my sweet ass hat, you can get them in my fourth wall store. There's gonna be a link in the description. We're gonna have some pretty dope T-shirts coming out next week. The roll hot can't roll hot roll lots T-shirt should be out next week. I gotta finish editing that, and then if you want to win that way should be out next week also, hopefully. The reason they're not out this week is because when I got back, a tornado went through, and like we didn't have internet and stuff for a couple days. And actually, I think there's a tornado going through right now, so that's pretty cool too.
yeah, yeah. We
Yeah,
get to
yeah,
experience
that's
this.
right. It's fun. So thanks again, Bailey. And yeah, this will be a series.
Of
What are we looking
course,
at? Roughly once a month? Is that the goal right now?
probably yeah, because I got to do once a month with Heath, and then just even that's a bear sometimes. Like with March, we didn't really record in March because he was traveling for work. We both had Adepticon.
Yep.
Like once a month's good because again, talking about hobby, like we have a hobby. We're gonna try and challenge each other to get
Yep.
something done by every podcast. So like if we're doing this every week, I don't have the time to build and paint stuff every
That's
week.
right. And that's what we're
But
going to end on. Go ahead.
I was gonna say since we were talking about Adepticon and firefight, uh, I got that box Edge of Insanity or Path to Insanity, something like that. So I will try and build something out of that box
Okay.
between now and when we meet next, and have it to show off.
And so what I'm going to commit to doing, because I built and painted the Gravis Captain that I have. So I'm not going to pick that. But what I am going to do is, and I'm going to start with the Sanguinor. That'll be my first goal. And because I have a bit
Okay.
more time than you, there's a good chance I have him at least base coated. Um, so that'll be my goal before next time is the Sanguinor. And then I do want to dig into the jump pack boys, but again, uh, I just like already am locking up in my brain thinking about building that many models and painting them, and so for everybody watching, like that's a thing for me, um, you know, people get decision paralysis at the table. And I don't, but where I get it is like when I'm looking at models that need built and painted, because I'm not a hobbyist in the strictest sense of the word. Like I don't mind painting, and when I sit down to paint, I can actually paint okay. Like I'm an average painter, but when I am painting stuff and then I think about how I have to paint more stuff, it just makes me not paint things, right? Like I'm just like, oh, well, I'll just not paint it. And then when there's a tournament, I'll just kind of like speed my way through everything just so I don't lose points at the tournament. And so
Right.
one of the things that I've done to kind of change that is rather than looking at it like, ooh, this all needs painted, I've just been focusing on painting one model a day. Like I've tried batch painting and that just doesn't work for me because I'm not seeing enough progress. You know, oh, look at me. I get to paint 10 models with blue pants today. Whoop de fucking do, like yay. Whereas like if I get one model and I just commit to painting that model start to finish, it 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 triggers my little like TBI addled brain into going, yeah, look at me doing things. And so it just becomes easier for me
Right.
because it's like, all right, I'm just painting one model and then I put it down. And a lot of times I'll put it down and then I'll just start painting another one. And so like that has already benefited me. Like the day I finished the Gravis Captain, and I wouldn't even necessarily call him done, but the day I finished him, I immediately picked up a Nightmare and started touching up the Nightmare. It was actually the one that was supposed to be packed up for you. So what I happened was I glued him onto some magnetic sheets so that I could cut him out and he could get magnetized, and then I forgot to cut him out.
That's funny.
But yeah, so like I immediately picked it up, touched up, painted it, put it down, and was like, cool. Now I have two models done, even though I'd only committed to one. So if you're like me and you're just like, man, I'd rather just like commit heinous acts of violence against myself rather than actually paint an army. Like, just try it this way. I have to pick and choose how I say things because I don't want YouTube to be like, nah, dog, no money for you. But
Right.
so like try it that way. Try to just grab a model and just be like, I'm gonna paint this model today. And you might find that after an hour you've painted that one model, maybe even 2 hours you've painted that one model, but because you've seen progress, it's easier for your brain to just put it down and be like, good. Or to even just like grab another one. And that's where it's helped me out a lot. So now that we've had our Midwest goodbye, we're gonna have our real goodbye. So again, we'll see you guys in about a month. Thanks again, Bailey. It was good chatting with you, buddy.
Good to hear from you, Chris.
Yeah.